everyone out there from the Sales Dev Squad community. We are here back with another episode of the Sales Dev Squad. Today, we will be speaking with the very famous Sarah Brazier, who is currently a Senior SDR over at Gong. You might also formerly know her through her video series, Life After SDR on LinkedIn. She's an up-and-coming sales leader, and I'm super excited that she's on the podcast with us today. Thanks so much for hopping on, Sarah.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. But yeah, Sarah, I'm definitely a huge fan personally of your work. Been following a lot of your LinkedIn content, and I got to say, you guys are absolutely crushing it over at Gong. I guess for the people and viewers out there who maybe aren't too familiar with you or Gong, do you mind just sharing a little bit more about who you are and what you guys are up to at Gong?
Yeah, totally. So I'll start with Gong. We are a revenue intelligence platform, which basically means that we capture, transcribe, and analyze customer-facing conversations and use that AI to surface insights into what separates your top performers from everybody else, why deals might be going dark or end in no decision, or understanding things around your go-to-market strategy. Like, you know, if you're rolling out a new messaging or pricing play, one, are reps adopting that? And two, is it working? And, you know, typically sales leaders, when they're trying to answer those three questions, they go to their CRM, and your CRM typically is outdated, not enough information, and it's full of opinions. It's, you know, 6,000 words are exchanged in a conversation like the one that we're having right now, and only 30 of those make it into your CRM. So what Gong does is it captures all of those customer-facing conversations and surfaces that revenue intelligence to you.
Very
so
cool.
That's what Gong does. And then I'm an SDR at Gong, so I'm pretty sure that all of your audience knows what an SDR is, but we think of ourselves as like the tip of the spear. We are actively prospecting and hunting for leads, trying to identify individuals who are suffering from the pains that our solution solves, and reach out to them with really clever, smart, and effective outreach. And then I just sort of post a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, and that's part of it's kind of part of my outreach, but honestly, it's just more. I stumbled into LinkedIn fame, and people wrote me lots of notes appreciating my content. So I just thought, well, if people like it, I'll just keep posting, because it helps out my team in terms of identifying people who might be interested in Gong. It definitely brings in leads for like our SMB team.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to help out my team, and I enjoy the discussions that unfold.
100%. I love that. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the Life After SDR video series that you have going on. I think you do a phenomenal job. You just bring this energy that I've never seen before. And yeah, I mean, Gong's super lucky to have you, and you're absolutely killing the game.
Yeah, I feel lucky to have Gong. They're super cool. It's such a cool, you know, the Life After SDR series. The CEO actually was talking to me in the kitchen, because I was an actor before I came to Gong. I was acting in a lot of theater in the Bay Area, and that doesn't make any money. I was just too hungry. I had to find a real job, is what I like to say. So I was talking to him. I was producing a show, and he asked me what I'd done over the weekend. And I said, oh, you know, I was producing a show. I was hosting one. And he said, why aren't you hosting a show for us, Sarah? And I said, oh, I don't know. I asked myself the same question. He's like, you need to do a show for us. And I was like, okay, sure. I can do that. That sounds great. And then I ran into him again, either it was like later that day or the next day. He's like, hey, did you talk to marketing? Did you get that arranged? And I was like, no, not yet. And he was like, come with me. And he walked me over. The CEO of the company walked me over to the chief marketing officer. And he was like, hey, I think Sarah should be on a show. We should figure something out. And so the CMO was like, okay, let's do it. Sarah, come up with an idea and we'll shoot it. And then it was like on me to come up with the content. But like, it was really the genesis of the CEO of Gong. So I feel super lucky, because that series wouldn't exist if it wasn't because of him.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. how did you like come up with the idea of like the theme of like the life after SDR? Like how did that like transpire in your head as like an idea that you wanted to like pursue?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, right, I've been charged by two of the most important people in the company to make a video series, and they just left it a blank slate. And I thought, well, what can I actually talk about? Because I haven't been in sales for a very long time, and I haven't even been a closer in sales, right? I've only been an SDR. So I need to talk about being an SDR. And I thought, well, people are already producing content around like the practicalities and the process
Mm-hmm.
behind being an SDR. And it has, it has some really good response, but a lot of the content just like it doesn't get a huge following. And for me, like once I've cracked the code, I was like, I cracked the code. I don't follow a lot of that. But what I would want to follow if it were me is like, what do I do next? Because I think everybody I know who gets into an SDR role, there's a piece of them that's dying to get out, right? They're like, I'm here. I took this role because I'm trying to become whatever. They've got something in mind. And SDR is a step in the process to build out the career they want to have, right? So I was like, okay, I know a lot of SDRs like that where they're just trying to get to the next level, but they don't necessarily have the education or the skill set to get there. And then there's this other kind of SDR that I talk to a lot who actually doesn't know what they want to be next. They have no idea that like what they could possibly do outside of being an SDR, but they know that it's an entry level role and that it's the beginning of a career. So they're trying to figure out what it is they can do. And I've just met so many SDRs who are like, well, I thought I wanted to be a closer, but now that I've worked like pretty closely with sales, I realize I don't want to be an account executive. So where do I go next? Like, do I just have to go find a completely different career? And I think that was sort of like the genesis of life after SDR. Is like, no, you could really be anything. I know so many people who started as an SDR, but then they moved into marketing or they moved into sales ops or they became a closer or they did like anything. Like the CEO of our company was an SDR when he was in college. Like you could be a CEO if you wanted to. We just have to have a conversation about how to get there. So I wanted to like equip SDRs with that knowledge of all the different roles that they could have, and also kind of talk through a process to get promoted. Like what is the path to promotion and how do you have those conversations early so you can make sure that you build the career you want, not the career you're forced into or feel like you have to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. How are things currently laid out? If you don't mind me asking, like at Gong, is this something that's super transparent with someone who's onboarded at the company very early on? Like, hey, these are the types of opportunities that you could eventually transition to, maybe like a year and a half down the line. I'm super curious because obviously, like with the video series, like I get to see different people at Gong that started as an SDR and went to recruiting and SDR and AE. So I mean, that's awesome that you guys do that. I'm curious to learn a little bit more, I guess, how it kind of works out internally, if you don't mind.
Totally. Yeah. So we have a really specific promotion criteria that you have to fit in order to, we call earning your ticket to play. And basically it requires you to like hit a certain amount of quota on a consistent basis to then become a senior SDR. And then once you've become a senior SDR, you have to hit quota again for like a certain amount of time. And then you earn your ticket to play. And that ticket to play gets you an opportunity to interview with any hiring manager who has headcount.
That's awesome.
So like when you're in that last quarter of hitting quota as a senior SDR, you need to be having conversations with your manager and with the hiring managers from those areas to give them a heads up. Like, hey, I'm going to be promoted in the next 3 months. And I want to make sure that there's a spot on your team for me. And if there's not, I want to understand when there could be a spot on your team. And so it's conversations like that. So that's kind of the point of life after SDR is you have to do that early, right? You need to be doing projects with people. You need to be having conversations. You need to take people out to coffee. You need to figure out exactly, what that job is and if you want to do it. But then you also need to you need to you need to get people on your side. I think of it as running a sales cycle, right? Who's the decision maker? Who are the influencers? How many decision makers are there? Who needs to be bought in? What objections do they have?
Interesting.
Like, you need to be thinking about it that way, where you're just figuring out each little piece of your deal cycle, and then you need to just get your firm future commitments, get things in writing, follow up on them. But yeah, like that's just for like anybody who's trying to get promoted. And then you have to have a proposal too, like write out why it's good for the company, why you should be promoted. Why is it good for someone to be internally hired versus finding an external hire for that role who has X amount of experience in it? You need to have a good counter argument for that. But yeah, like there's a clear promotion criteria, and Gong is very open to allowing people to become a recruiter, or become, go into marketing or sales ops, or, anything really. But not every company is Gong. So
100%.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Why do you think it's so important for any organization, maybe let's say SaaS, for example, to like really make the most out of their employees? And, for example, if they're just, they took an SDR role, figured out it wasn't for them, but they really tried their hardest and did like perform pretty well. Like, why do you think it's so important for any organization to really like cultivate that person, that talent, whether that be anywhere in the organization, as opposed to just like saying adios, good luck, here's your 2 weeks kind of thing? Just curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to revenue, right? So you have, you can think about the opportunity cost of a hire, right? So you have the cost to bring someone on, to onboard them, to pay them when they're not producing. That can be a lot of money. So if they're not, that's a sunk cost, right? Like you have to invest in someone, and then they can produce for you. And then there's the opportunity cost of what they can bring into the company, right? So as an SDR, your opportunity cost is your quota, and then if you seem like a high performer, anything else that you could bring in. So there's a lot riding on your back, depending on how much your quota is and how much money you bring in. And as you move up market, the same thing happens with your account executives or anything else. So if a company brings on an SDR and they invest a ton of time and money into, onboarding them, educating them, paying them on a monthly basis, that person then builds up a level of tribal knowledge from their tenure at the company, understanding the culture, the inner workings, how business is done. So it behooves a company to promote internally, because that sunk cost of that rep doesn't exist when they're promoted internally, right? They still have a learning curve. They still have to learn things, but that learning curve is typically smaller. And if they build out, and this is like, it's hard for startups to do this, but a good startup will begin to build one out. But they need to build out like a plan to educate a rep as they sit in seat as an SDR, as like a senior SDR, however your company organizes it. If you're sitting in seat and you are consistently producing or overproducing quota-wise, then they need to have something in place so you can educate yourself on the next role, so that when you graduate from senior SDRdom, you can then move into a role that you've been preparing for, that you've educated yourself on, and that again reduces that onboarding or ramp time. And so your opportunity cost increases. So basically the company loses less revenue on internal promotions. So it's super savvy just from a numbers perspective. And I think that if you're an SDR who's making the case, it's always beneficial to have the numbers behind it, because it's an investment for the company and they need to be convinced that they're making the smart investment. But when you have more tenured reps who stay at a company longer, they end up producing more. Typically, like, you can promote an SDR. They don't have experience. So like their starting rate is lower than someone that you bring out who has 5 years of experience, but they've already have this tribal knowledge. And so, you can, like, it ends up being more cost effective for a company to do internal promotions if they do it right, but they have to invest early in a rep to prepare them for that promotion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. That's really awesome that Gong has that built out and really sees value in that, and that absolutely makes sense. Um, Super great insight. Appreciate that, Sarah.
Yeah.
I guess to kind of like switch gears here. Like I know that you mentioned earlier, like you obviously like were an actress, still kind of are. Like how did you go from that to discovering that an opportunity in tech sales, an opportunity as an SDR was an actual like thing, like you could actually make money and have a really prosperous career? Like what was that like turning point for you, or like how are you kind of informed of the opportunity?
Yeah, totally. So I moved to the Bay Area and I was doing theater, and I was getting tons of parts. That was great. I was doing lots of shows, but when you're doing a show for 30 hours a week and it's 2 months worth of work and you get $500 at the end of the performance, like the end of the whole run,
Oh, wow.
you're like, oh yeah, I can't pay my rent with that. So I was working a bunch of different jobs. For a while, I was like coaching and teaching speech and debate down in Fremont, but I was also working as a barista in the East Bay, but I was living in the city. So I would wake up super early and drive out to the East Bay and open the coffee shop and work there. And then I'd sleep in my car, like take a nap in my car, and then drive down to Fremont and teach until 8 o'clock at night. And then I'd drive back home, and I'd get home like around 9:30, and then I'd wake up and do it all again. And that was without doing a show. And then I just thought, man, like this is like not sustainable. So I still wanted to be an actor. So then I took a pay cut, because I was making like really good money as a coach, but it was just so much work, and the parts and the theater stuff was in the city, not down in Fremont. So I got myself transferred to a coffee shop in San Francisco, and then found a job working as a temp at a tech company, I was doing that. So I'd wake up at 4 a.m. I'd jog down to the BART station. I'd get on BART. I'd get to the coffee shop at 4:30. I'd get everything set up so that we could open the doors at 5. And then I'd make coffee till 9:30. At 9:30, I'd leave and I'd walk straight to the tech company I was working for. And they had like a shower there. So I'd shower there because I just smelled like coffee. And so like I'd like wash the smell of Phil's off my body, and then set up and get to the front desk by 10. And then I would have like total, I think I had like 45 minutes worth of a break. You get like 30 minutes for lunch, and then you get one 15-minute break throughout the day. So I would smush those together, and they had a workout room at the tech company. I liked the company because they had a shower, and they had a workout room, and they had free lunch and snacks. And I was like, that's what I need. So I'd like go do a workout during my lunch hour. I'd like make a plate, but I'd just leave it at the front desk, and I'd do a workout during my lunch hour. And then I'd shower again and come back down and work the front desk and like eat my lunch while I greeted people. And then I'd leave at 5, and then I'd go to rehearsal. And I'd go to rehearsal in the East Bay because that's where the show was. So I'd like go home. I had a car, and I'd like drive out to rehearsal that started at 7, but I had traffic. Like I had to get home, so I get there at 5:30. And then there's an hour and a half of traffic to get through. So it's just like, oh my gosh. And I'd get off rehearsal at 10 o'clock, get home at 11. Like, oh man, I'm so tired.
Long days.
I rehearsed 5 days a week, but 2 of those days was the weekend. And then I worked at the coffee shop and at the doing my temp job 5 days a week as well. So I worked 7 days a week, and I was really, really tired. And I thought I should probably just get a job that pays me like one number, and I'm not paying taxes on 3 different jobs, and I'm not like starving. I only made enough money to pay rent. That was it. I couldn't afford to buy food. And I was like, yeah, I don't think I thought this actor thing through. I really tried. I really did for 2 years, but it's not working. So I need to get a real job. And I read somewhere about an actor who worked in sales, and they made it work. Like they arranged it with their company that they could make it work. And then I met a stand-up comedian who was an SDR.
No way.
Yeah, in the Bay Area, and he's really good. His name is Caleb Lush. He's so funny. Everyone should go look him up right now. He's really good. He's gonna be famous. I know it. But I met him at Piano Fight in San Francisco, which is it's like a really cool theater / bar that pretty much every artist in the Bay Area goes to. It's super cool. So anyway, he told me that he was working in sales and doing stand-up, and I thought, that's what I need. I need that job. So when I was the temp, I started taking everybody out to like coffee. They would always buy me coffee because I think they knew I was so poor, but I would offer to buy them coffee. They'd be, no, I got this. I was like, do I really look that tired? But it was great because I couldn't afford to buy them coffee anyway. But I took like the CMO of the coffee or of the tech company out for coffee. I took head of enablement out for coffee, and I just started asking them about their jobs. A lot of them had sales in their background, and I thought like, okay, so the seed has been planted that sales could work with theater, and then these people are telling me that they've built these really cool careers with a sales background. I think I should try to get into sales. So I told the enablement guy, his name is Jim Jones. I was like, Jim, I think I want to be in sales. He said, cool. The next day he came to my desk and he had a book. He said, read this book and let me know if you still want to be in sales. So I read the book and I was like, yeah, I still want to be in sales. And
what book was it?
You know, I can't remember off the top of my head what it's called. It's like, it has a white cover with blue printed like words. And it's all about like relationship selling and building relationships with people.
Okay.
And it's like a very salesy book. But it's totally about, it's about relationship selling. And I was like, cool. I read the book, and then he was like, okay, here's some companies where I know people that are where I know people and I think they might be hiring. Find out who's hiring. So I did. And he introduced me to an SDR at one company, and I had a cold call with her. And so she put me in the list and recommended me. And then like all of a sudden I had my first job as an SDR, and then I was an SDR. And that's like how I came to sales, was totally out of desperation. And then when I moved to Gong, I realized, man, I can actually be good at this too.
Mm-hmm.
And I started just having like really success, like month after month I was having success. And I was enjoying it a lot. And it was my goal that by my first year at Gong, I would be promoted out of SDR and into AE. And I knew that in order to achieve that goal, I needed to pause theater and acting, because I just thought I can have everything. I just can't have it all at the same time. And it makes more sense to build a career that is going to support you financially and become a cornerstone for any other projects you want to do. And so I just thought, yeah, like I should just double down on sales. And then I realized I really liked it. And I was like, oh no, I think I should just do sales. I think I should just do this. This is really fun. It's really hard, but it's really fun. And that's kind of like the genesis of how I moved from theater to the wonderful world of SDR.
You've been killing it ever since. I love it.
Killing it. My first SDR job, I did not kill it. I definitely struggled. I was like not doing great.
Why do you think that was? Like, what was kind of like your biggest challenge, like during your first SDR role?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things. Like I just had to make this transition into a world of sales, and I didn't have a lot of support around how do you create, like those processes that I was talking about earlier. I think like most SDRs at the beginning of their career really need to have like processes in place. And it's not a script per se that you have to follow every word and to a T. But if you don't have any concept of what a good cold call sounds like, or or the bones and the structure of how to conduct one, and how can you make a good cold call. And if you don't understand the concept of like how to write an enticing email, then how can you write a good one? So I spent so much time, I built out all of these complicated sequences, and I wrote all of these amazing emails, and no one would bite. And it's because I was writing like paragraphs and paragraphs. And I'd throw in like videos at the end. And like, I was just doing way more work than I needed to. But I didn't have anybody telling me like, hey, that's actually not effective. Actually, maybe you should try this. Like, I wasn't getting any feedback. And then on cold calls, I knew like the first 2 lines I needed to say. But then when it came to objections, I didn't know how to objection handle. And I would like go to my manager and be like, I just remember asking him, like, is there like some kind of call tree or something? Like if they say X, I say Y. Is there anything like that? Because, you know, sometimes people say stuff and I freeze because I don't have the answer. And he said, maybe you're not cut out for sales, Sarah. Sales is part art, part science. And that part's the art part. And I don't think I can teach you that. And I just thought, you don't know what art is. You were never an actor. You don't know. I'm going to prove you wrong. And then I found like Sandler.
There you
When
go.
I got to Gong, like they taught us Sandler and they taught us objection handling. And I was like, oh, so there is a Y that I can use to respond to their X. There are ways to have this conversation. Suddenly I understood how to objection handle because someone literally took me through a PowerPoint slide of every objection you'll probably receive on the phone and the best practices around handling it and how to conceptualize and objection handling. And I was like, oh my gosh, my mind is blown. As soon as I had the tools and like the knowledge, then I could take off as an SDR. But in my first role, not to be like, you know, you're supposed to blame yourself for everything that happens. Like either you take responsibility for it or it's, but you never say it's like someone else's fault. Like it's not anybody's fault per se, but I definitely didn't have the tools I needed. And there was no one with the bandwidth to give them to me. And the enablement team hadn't built anything out for the SDR organization. And so like, I was just super in the dark, and and I went to lots of people to answer questions, and it felt like nobody had an answer that made sense and was helpful. So I think that was like a really big difference when I got to Gong. And I was like determined to be amazing at Gong. Like I wanted them to know that they had made a smart hiring choice. So I really doubled down on learning everything and stayed late every day in the office my first quarter so I could build pipeline. Yeah.
That's
so those,
awesome.
yeah, it was definitely like, but no, I didn't start out great. And I think that like everyone should know that pretty much like everybody I know, whoever was amazing at something, they probably started out sucking more than everybody else. And they just decided in their brain that they weren't going to suck anymore and that they were going to do whatever it took to get ahead. And then they did. They doubled down on it and they did. So yeah, but no, I didn't start out great. I started out like, oh, you didn't book a meeting this month, Sarah? That's a problem.
I love it. That's awesome. And I think one thing that really sticks out to me about you, Sarah, is you really want to help your teammates succeed. I was watching Patrick Joyce's podcast, Salescast. Shout out to Patrick Joyce. And he was talking about how like he saw a post that you made or how you were really just trying to help your teammates like source meetings. Like you're really an unselfish team player and you want your teammates to succeed, which is awesome. I feel like you don't really see that too often. Like how, I guess my question is like, why do you think every company needs to have like great leaders like yourself, like to have just very unselfish people that are always willing to like help out their teammates? And like, why are you so passionate about like helping others succeed?
Yeah, well, I think like, it's not even just every company, it's just everywhere you need to have great leaders. But you know, you can simultaneously be a leader and you can be a follower. Like if everybody was a leader, then we wouldn't have any movements. Because you need to have people to buy into a vision. So I guess like for me, the reason why I want to help out my teammates, I think is just because that's the precedent that's been set at Gong. When I first started, we segmented. So I worked SMB accounts. There was a team working mid-market accounts. There's a team working enterprise, and you don't source outside your segment. And so like I'd get a ping on Slack and someone would send me a lead and they'd be like, hey, this guy just moved companies. He bought Gong in his last company. You should hit him up. Be like, oh man, like that's a hot lead. So then I call that guy and I book a meeting, and suddenly like my teammates were helping me book meetings, or my manager, if he saw something, activity in Marketo or D2 Crowd or whatever, he would send it to me. Or if he knew something was good, he'd send me a link, and he was always, because our manager was always prospecting, he would just send the companies that he wanted to prospect if he were an SDR to us. So he was just always just sourcing stuff to people. And Adam Ochart, who he recently became an AE at Gong, he was always sending people stuff. And Danny Hutto was sending me stuff. Danny has been at the company. He was like I think he was the first SDR at Gong. And so he knows the customer base really well. So anytime somebody moves on LinkedIn, he's probably connected to them and he would know, and he would send that to people. And so like there's just a culture of Gong at sharing opportunities and sharing stuff. Because if like, it's the cliche of, I scratch your back, you scratch mine or whatever. But I think that it's more than that quid pro quo. It's, which is fun to use in sales. It's great. It's a great tool if you're ever negotiating with someone where they ask you to do something and you're trying to get them to take a meeting. You can always quid pro quo them. But like, I think like it speaks more to like a basic level of what kind of humans do we want to be in this world? And you spend most of your time at work. Like most of your life you're going to spend at work. So whatever like core morals or ethics that you want to live, like those truths that you want to live, you need to live them at work. And so if you're trying to be a quote unquote good person, but more importantly, if you want to serve others, then you have to live that. And I think in the world of SDR land, serving others is like, one, it's really serving your customers, trying to find the people that are hurting, like they're suffering from real business pains, and you need to uncover them and try to help them to have a conversation to see if our company can help them. Like that's how you should conceptualize your job, is you're looking for someone who's sick and they don't know they're sick, but you have the cure. Like that's what an SDR is doing. And so if they don't have like stomach flu, then don't try to sell them your stomach flu medicine, right? But if they do have stomach flu and they're throwing up, they're like, no, I'm fine. You're like, but you're throwing up, man. Let's just have a conversation about it. Let's just have a conversation about like the impact throwing up every 20 minutes has on your productivity, right? Like that's how you should conceptualize your outreach, is like, I have medicine for a specific disease or cure, or I have that cure and I need to find people who are suffering from it. So like that's part of it. And if you think of your job as a service, then you end up being more successful and being able to have better conversations, because you start digging for pain. You start asking pain and qualifying people based on their pain, not trying to book a meeting for your AE and, continually ask them for a meeting without delivering any insight or help or content to make their lives easier. So that's like part of it. And then like the other part, if you want to serve other people, is like you serve your teammates. You serve them in the ways that you know how. Like Adam Ochart was so good on our team at building out curriculum and teaching it, and like just really effectively like leading these like call reviews, because he had such a great business acumen. And that's how he was that's how he served our team, was teaching us a lot about the impact that Gong has on other businesses. And for me, like I have a gift, I think, of having like a following on LinkedIn. And so I need to take that and use it to my best ability to serve other people, like to point them in a direction toward a lead or an opportunity, and help book meetings. Because at the end of the day, we're all, we all need to be fed. We all need to have our basic needs met. And that's why we have jobs. And being an SDR is a hard job. So any little bit of help is great.
100%. Really appreciate that insight, Sarah. Just have a couple last questions here for you. For any SDR out there that's, I guess, struggling at the moment, I think what you're really good at is just really making yourself stand out, being unique, standing amongst the noise. Like, how can SDR stand out and really be different in this like world of Spamageddon and SDRs and LinkedIn? Like, how can an SDR, adapt and really just position themselves as someone unique in their outreach, I guess, so to speak?
Yeah, and you mean like in email outreach or
anything? Yeah, or just any examples. Obviously, you're killing on LinkedIn, so maybe like any tips that you have around that.
Yeah, for LinkedIn specifically, I just started writing on a regular basis. I try to post once a day. It doesn't always happen, but once a day, except on weekends. On weekends, I try to not be on screens because my eyes are getting old. I have to wear blue light glasses. Otherwise, I can't see the screen after noon. This is aging. It's real. No, so like, I think on LinkedIn, I was actually I was thinking about this because a lot of people have asked me this question. By a lot, I mean like 5. I'm not that smart.
Hey, that's enough. That's a lot.
If 5 people are thinking, or if 5 people ask it, then maybe like 10 are thinking it. That's kind of how I like to think of things. That's why, if at meetings, if I ask the question, there's got to be somebody else who is thinking it too. But I think really generally, at a really genuine and general level, is to post about, if you want to post regularly, obviously, and post about things that post about the things that you know. So I just post about things I know, which is like my job, my experience, reflections on my life, and like what it's like to be an SDR. That's what I know. I think like having a healthy amount of content that's both empathetic, I try to tell stories that people will connect with, that they'll empathize with.
Yeah.
And then I also try to articulate value. How do you write an email? What can you do for outreach after an event? Things like that. I try to have like a good mix because, I mean, if you think about any kind of curriculum or learning, if you're trying to learn stuff, we learn a lot through story. If you think about a history book, you probably learned more from watching historical fiction movies or reading historical fiction books. You remember those stories better than your history textbook. So if you can like incorporate this life lesson into a story, I think that that's really impactful. Or a job lesson into a story. Like, why does it matter? And then when it comes to the actual writing of content, I have my degree's in journalism. So one of the things is you always write for the ear. Ernest Hemingway, who I love him, he's a fantastic writer. I've read a ton of his novels and short stories. He read everything he wrote aloud. Because he thought that the way his stories were meant to be read aloud, and they should be pleasing to the ear. And then I also read a ton of plays and I read a ton of books because I'm a theater person at heart. And so I try to use those principles when I write something on LinkedIn. It should be very clear. There should like a clear story told in a clear way, a simple story told simply. Goes a lot farther than lots of twists and turns, especially because you only have a certain number of characters. And then write it in your voice, write it how you would say it if you were saying it out loud, and then read it out loud, and then delete the parts that don't matter and don't make sense, and then read it out loud again until it flows. Like, it should have some level of poetic flow to it.
Mhm.
And then your story will kind of blossom. And that goes for like writing anything, but
Mhm.
specifically for LinkedIn content, for like long form, like, or medium form, like longer posts where you have to hit see more, but aren't like an article.
Mhm.
Um, like those are my suggestions
Mhm.
about like how to tell interesting stories.
Mhm. That's an awesome insight. I'll definitely try to put that into practice, but really appreciate that. I guess our last question here for the pod, Sarah, I always like to end off with this question here. Anyone listening out there that is potentially considering a role in tech sales or as an SDR, BDR, MDR, what advice do you have for them?
I mean, you should 100% do it. You will learn more if you find a good company. So find a good company. And that means when you interview for a job, just don't take the first job that offers you a position unless they're amazing. But interview them the way they're interviewing you. Figure out what their turnover is like. Figure out why people, why is their turnover? Figure out, what they do in order to enable you and set you up for success. What kind of ongoing education do they have in career development? How do they handle promotions? Are they comped on if you move out of the SDR organization or not? Because that does affect like your manager's willingness to give you up if you're super great, right? Doesn't mean that you shouldn't work for a place that doesn't do that, but just try to get a picture of like how seriously they take growing their SDRs into different parts of the organization, and ask for specific examples. Like figure out what that's like, and then go work there. And a good SDR, like you need to be an SDR for about a year to a year and a half before you should be promoted. And that might sound like a long time, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
From there, you'll learn so much about the way a business runs. You'll learn about like the importance of revenue. You'll learn about marketing. You'll learn both about marketing and closing roles. If you follow your deals from start to finish, you will learn so much. I was talking to a guy at a sales conference. I think it was at Dreamforce. I was talking to, I think this was him. Yeah, I think it was a guy at Dreamforce. I can't remember exactly who it was, so I'm not going to say because I think I know who it was, but I'm not.
No worries.
But he basically was like, I talk to people who are getting their MBA, like and they asked me what, I know who it was. I was talking to an investor from Sequoia Capital.
Oh, wow.
And he said he goes and he speaks at, these universities like Berkeley or Penn State or wherever, these people getting their MBAs, and they ask him what their first job should be after getting their MBA. And he tells them be an SDR because they will learn more about the business than any other job. And I think that's so true. Like, so, like I talked about when I've talked to other SDRs, they get into the SDR role and they're eager to get out. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. But for me, I didn't start finding success or learning until I stopped trying to get out and I just started trying to be good. And like, that's what I think you need to do as an SDR. You need to like sit down in the role, sink into it, learn how to be excellent. Because no matter what you do, if you go into a closing role, you will keep yourself fed if you know how to prospect. Because you won't always have an SDR as good as you were, but you know exactly how good you are at finding leads, and you can do that. You should be able to prospect and feed yourself. If you go into marketing, right, you know exactly the words coming out of your prospects' mouths, the objections that they have, the reasons why they wouldn't want to buy, but you also are listening to the initial things that pique their interest about your pitch. And you can start taking that and developing that into like an overall marketing scheme. But you wouldn't be able to do that if you weren't sitting in this in-between space between marketing and closing. Mm-hmm. And then like customer success, like, there's so many different opportunities and options. Mm-hmm. And you won't be able to dabble and explore in those the way you do as an SDR. You learn so much. So for any SDR listening to this who's like, oh man, I don't want to be an SDR anymore, I just want to be an AE. It's like, no, but really get good at being an SDR and learn the sales cycle, and then run a sales cycle on your managers to get into the next role. And start using what you've learned from how a sales cycle is run into how I get promoted, because that's the first sales cycle you're going to run. And that's one of the most important sales cycles you're going to run, because that's going to get you into any job you ever want ever.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's phenomenal advice, Sarah. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. I guess before we head out here, Sarah, if anyone listening here would like to reach you directly, see a demo of Gong, check out your IMDb page, whatever it may be, where can they find you?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. I don't even know what my LinkedIn like backslash is, but my name is Sarah Brazier. Yeah, Sarah Brazier, Brazier, Sarah with an H. And then you can always shoot me an email, sarah.brazier@gong.io. Just like put that you listen to this podcast in like the subject line, so I know where you heard about me, and I can share the love. But yeah, I mean, reach out, and I'll talk to you about Gong. I'll talk to you about life. I'll talk to you about the wonderful world of theater. If you want to, go into like some Meisner, we could do that together. Improv and SDRing, that's a real thing.
SDRing, I love it.
Yeah. But yeah, I would love for people to reach out. I'm always happy to share more. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. And this has been awesome.
Yeah, I hope it's helped someone out there. Yeah, because being an SDR is hard, and it's okay that it's hard, but you can make it great. You just gotta learn to love it.
Absolutely. You definitely inspired me, and I took a lot away from your chat here. So thank you so much for being a phenomenal guest, Sarah. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Sales Dev Squad community, for tuning in to another episode. We'll catch you guys on the next one, but thank you so much, Sarah. Really appreciate your time.
Woo!